My name is Amanda Reynolds, 37, and I never thought a simple birthday gift would unravel 20 years of family secrets. When my daughter Lily opened that package from my parents and whispered, "What is this?" holding up a faded photograph of a woman who looked exactly like me, I felt my entire world collapse. The woman in the photo wasn't me, it was someone I'd never seen before, yet the resemblance was undeniable. Before I dive into how this moment changed everything, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoy family drama with unexpected twists. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how this revenge story unfolds, because sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones who raised you. Growing up in Maplewood, New Jersey, I'd always been the perfect daughter. My parents, Richard and Eleanor Reynolds, raised me with strict expectations, piano lessons, straight A's, and the pressure to attend an Ivy League school. I'd followed their blueprint without question, becoming the successful architect they'd always wanted me to be. At 37, I had it all: a beautiful colonial home in the suburbs of Boston, a loving husband named David who worked as a pediatric surgeon, and our precious 16-year-old daughter Lily, who was the spitting image of me. My relationship with my parents had always been complicated. While they provided me with every material advantage, emotional warmth was scarce in our household. They rarely visited us in Boston, always making excuses about their busy retirement lives in Florida. I'd made peace with this distance, focusing instead on giving Lily the warmth and support I never had. I was determined to break the cycle of emotional detachment that had defined my own childhood. The day everything changed started like any other. It was a crisp October morning, and Lily was excited about her upcoming birthday. We'd planned a small celebration, just the three of us, as usual. My parents had never attended any of Lily's birthdays, sending extravagant gifts instead. This year was no different. The package arrived 3 days before Lily's birthday, beautifully wrapped with a card that simply read, "To our dear granddaughter on her 16th birthday. May this help you understand your place in the world. Love, Grandma and Grandpa." I thought nothing of it at the time. Their gifts were always expensive but impersonal, designer clothes, jewelry, or electronics. I placed the package on the kitchen counter, planning to give it to Lily on her birthday. But that evening, while I was preparing dinner and David was still at the hospital working late, Lily spotted the package. "Mom, can I open Grandma and Grandpa's gift early?" she asked, her eyes gleaming with excitement. I hesitated. My parents were sticklers for rules and traditions. But then again, they would never know. "Go ahead," I said with a smile. "Just don't tell them you opened it early." I continued chopping vegetables as Lily carefully unwrapped the package. The kitchen was quiet except for the sound of paper tearing and the rhythmic thud of my knife against the cutting board. Then, the silence became deafening. "Mom?" Lily's voice was barely a whisper. "What is this?" I turned to see my daughter holding a small wooden box. The lid was open, revealing what looked like old photographs and documents. Lily's face had drained of color, her hands trembling as she held up a faded photograph. "Who is this woman? She looks exactly like you, but the date on the back says 1985. You would have been a baby then." I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel and took the photograph from her. The moment I saw it, my blood ran cold. The woman in the photo was indeed a mirror image of me, same heart-shaped face, same dimpled smile, same unique hazel eyes with the golden flecks that Lily had inherited. But it wasn't me. I had never seen this woman before in my life. The photo showed her standing in front of a house I didn't recognize, holding a baby. Written on the back in my mother's unmistakable handwriting, "Elizabeth and baby, May 1985. Elizabeth. A name I'd never heard mentioned in our family. I don't know," I stammered, suddenly feeling lightheaded. "What else is in the box?" Together, we emptied the contents onto the kitchen counter. There were more photographs of the mysterious Elizabeth, graduating from college, at what appeared to be her wedding, always with that smile that was eerily identical to mine. Then there were documents, a birth certificate for Elizabeth and Reynolds, born to Richard and Eleanor Reynolds on April 15, 1967, making her exactly 18 years older than me. And a death certificate dated September 10, 1985, cause of death, car accident. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely read the final document, my own birth certificate. But the date was wrong. According to this certificate, I was born on September 12, 1985, just 2 days after Elizabeth's death. And my birth mother's name wasn't Eleanor Reynolds. It was Elizabeth Reynolds. The room seemed to spin around me as the implications became clear. Elizabeth wasn't my sister. She was my biological mother. And my parents, the people who had raised me, were actually my grandparents. They had lied to me my entire life. Mom? Lily's voice sounded far away. Are you okay? What does all this mean? I couldn't answer her. The perfect life I thought I had, the identity I'd built everything around, was crumbling beneath my feet. The truth was staring me in the face from that wooden box, a truth my parents had deliberately kept from me for 37 years. And now, for some unfathomable reason, they had chosen to reveal it in the cruelest way possible, through a birthday gift to my teenage daughter. The next 24 hours passed in a blur. David came home to find me and Lily huddled at the kitchen table, surrounded by the scattered contents of the wooden box. He listened in stunned silence as I explained what we'd discovered. Always my rock, he held my hand tightly as I called my parents, no, my grandparents, demanding answers. Why now? I screamed into the phone, my voice cracking with emotion. Why tell me like this after hiding it for 37 years? My father's voice was calm, clinical even. We thought it was time you knew the truth, Amanda. Lily is the same age Elizabeth was when she got pregnant with you. We didn't want history to repeat itself. So you decided to drop this bomb on my daughter instead of telling me directly? I was shaking with rage. You had no right. We had every right, my mother interjected, her tone defensive. We raised you when Elizabeth couldn't. We gave you a better life than she would have. She was irresponsible, headstrong. She was your daughter. I cut her off. And you erased her from my life. You stole my history, my identity. We protected you, my father insisted. Elizabeth's choices would have ruined your future. We did what was best. The conversation went in circles, their justifications growing more absurd with each passing minute. They had convinced themselves that their deception was an act of love, that hiding my mother's existence was somehow a gift to me. When I demanded to know who my biological father was, they claimed not to know. Elizabeth had refused to tell them. We're coming to Boston, I finally said. Tomorrow. We need to talk about this face to face. They tried to object, citing health concerns and the short notice, but I was beyond caring about their convenience. This conversation couldn't happen over the phone. I needed to look into their eyes when they explained why they had robbed me of my mother. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in our home office, searching online for any trace of Elizabeth Reynolds. There was precious little to find, a mention in a college yearbook, a brief obituary that described her as a beloved daughter with no mention of a child. It was as if they had systematically erased her existence, keeping only those photographs as private reminders of the daughter they had lost. David found me there at dawn, still in yesterday's clothes, eyes red from crying and lack of sleep. You should try to rest, he said gently. You need your strength for when they arrive. I shook my head. Every time I close my eyes, I see her face, my face. I keep thinking about how young she was when she died. 28, David. She was younger than I am now. And I never got to know her. He pulled up a chair beside me. What do you want to happen today? What outcome are you hoping for? It was a good question, one I hadn't fully considered in my anger and shock. I want the truth, all of it. No more secrets, no more lies. And I want to understand why they chose to reveal it this way, through Lily. It's unforgivable. Do you think they meant to cause pain? David asked carefully. Or could this have been some misguided attempt to finally come clean? I laughed bitterly. If they wanted to come clean, they could have told me themselves. They could have sat me down as an adult and explained. Instead, they put this burden on my 16-year-old daughter. I paused, a new thought occurring to me. Unless they knew I would never forgive them, and they were trying to use Lily to soften the blow. David's expression confirmed that he had considered the same possibility. They might have thought Lily would intercede for them, keep you from cutting them off completely. Using my daughter as a shield, I muttered. That's a new low, even for them. The doorbell rang at precisely noon. My grandparents, stood on our doorstep looking smaller and older than I remembered. My father's shoulders were hunched, my mother's face lined with anxiety. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for them. Then I remembered the calculated way they had dropped this bomb into my life, and my resolve hardened. Come in, I said coldly, stepping aside. They entered hesitantly, glancing around as if expecting to see Lily. But I had asked David to take her out for the day. This conversation wasn't for her ears. We sat in the living room, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. The wooden box sat on the coffee table between us, a physical manifestation of their deception. Explain, I said simply. Everything. From the beginning. My mother cleared her throat. Elizabeth was our only child for a long time. We had her later in life, and the doctors said we couldn't have more children. She was difficult from an early age. Rebellious, defiant. She was a normal teenager, my father corrected softly, surprising me. We were the ones who were too strict, too controlling. We can admit that now. My mother shot him a look but continued. When she was 17, she started dating a boy we didn't approve of. Ryan Calloway. He was from the wrong side of town, no ambition, always in trouble. We forbade her from seeing him, but she snuck around behind our backs. When we found out she was pregnant at 18, we were devastated, my father added. We gave her an ultimatum, end the relationship with Ryan and keep the baby, or leave our home. We thought she would choose us. But she chose him, I whispered, a strange pride welling up inside me for this mother I never knew. My mother nodded stiffly. She moved in with his family. We didn't speak for months. Then Ryan was arrested for drug possession. He went to prison, and Elizabeth came home, 7 months pregnant with you. The story unfolded like a tragedy. Elizabeth had given birth to me while living with my grandparents, trying to finish her college degree as a single mother. Ryan had been released from prison when I was 2 months old but had no interest in fatherhood. He disappeared from our lives, never to return. Elizabeth was determined to give you a good life, my father said, his voice thick with emotion. She worked so hard, studying, working part-time, taking care of you. We helped where we could, but we were still angry with her choices. Then the accident happened, my mother continued, her composure finally cracking. It was raining. The roads were slick. She was coming home from a late class. The other driver ran a red light. I closed my eyes, trying to imagine my mother's final moments. Had she thought of me? Had she been afraid? We were devastated, my father said. We'd lost our daughter, and suddenly we had you, a 2-month-old baby who had lost her mother. So you decided to pretend she never existed? I asked incredulously. To raise me as your daughter instead of your granddaughter? It seemed simpler that way, my mother defended. Cleaner. A fresh start for everyone. You were so young, you would never remember Elizabeth. And we didn't want to be reminded of our failure as parents. Your failure, I repeated, the words bitter on my tongue. So you erased her to protect yourselves, not me. They exchanged a glance, unable to deny the truth in my accusation. Why tell me now? I demanded. After all these years? My father looked down at his hands. We're getting older, Amanda. Facing our own mortality. The guilt has been overwhelming. We thought you deserved to know before it's too late. But why tell Lily first? Why not come to me directly? My mother had the decency to look ashamed. We were afraid you would refuse to listen. That you would shut us out completely. We thought Lily might help you understand our perspective. You used my daughter as a pawn, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. You dropped this bomb in her lap because you were too cowardly to face me yourselves. They didn't deny it. They couldn't. Get out, I said, standing up. Get out of my house. Amanda, please, my mother began, but I cut her off. You had 37 years to tell me the truth. You chose to lie every single day of those years. And when you finally decided to come clean, you did it in the most cowardly, manipulative way possible. I don't want you in my life, and I certainly don't want you in Lily's life. They left without further argument, two defeated old people shuffling out of my home and, I hoped, out of my life forever. But as the door closed behind them, I realized this was just the beginning of my journey. I had lost the parents I thought I had, but I had discovered a mother I never knew existed. Somehow, I needed to find a way forward, for myself, for David, and especially for Lily. In the days following my grandparents' visit, I found myself drawn again and again to the wooden box and its contents. Each photograph of Elizabeth became precious to me, windows into a life cut tragically short, glimpses of the mother I never had the chance to know. I studied her face for hours, noting every similarity between us, the slight tilt of our smiles, the way we both tucked our hair behind our ears, the determined set of our jaws. David suggested I take some time off work, and for once, I agreed without argument. My architecture firm was understanding, a family emergency, I told them vaguely. I couldn't bring myself to explain the truth. How could I, when I was still struggling to understand it myself? Lily was remarkably resilient, as teenagers often are. After the initial shock, she became fascinated with the grandmother she never knew existed. She looks so much like you, Mom, she said one evening as we sat together on the couch, examining the photographs. And like me too. It's like seeing into the future and the past at the same time. I put my arm around her shoulders. I'm sorry you found out this way. It wasn't fair to you. Lily leaned against me. I'm not sorry. I'm glad we know the truth now. And I'm glad we found out together. She picked up a photo of Elizabeth at what appeared to be her high school graduation. She looks so happy here. So full of life. Yes, I agreed, feeling the familiar ache in my chest. She does. I couldn't stop thinking about Elizabeth's relationship with Ryan Calloway, my biological father. My grandparents had painted him as a delinquent, a bad influence, but I couldn't help wondering if that was just another of their distortions. They had been so wrong about so many things, why should I trust their assessment of him? A week after the confrontation, I found myself sitting in the local library, scrolling through digital archives of newspapers from Maplewood, searching for any mention of Ryan Calloway. It didn't take long to find the article about his arrest in 1985, possession of cocaine with intent to distribute, sentenced to 18 months in state prison. So that part, at least, was true. But people change. People grow. And I needed to know what had become of the man who had contributed half of my DNA. When I told David of my plan to try to find Ryan, he was supportive but cautious. Just prepare yourself for disappointment, he warned. It's been a long time. He might not want to be found. I know, I acknowledged. But I need to try. For my own peace of mind. finding Ryan proved more difficult than I had anticipated. Social media searches turned up dozens of Ryan Callaways, none of whom seemed to be the right age or from New Jersey. Public records searches revealed that he had a few more run-ins with the law in the late 1980s and early 1990s, petty theft, another drug charge, but then the trail went cold. I was about to give up when I received an email from a private investigator I had contacted. He had managed to track down Ryan's sister, Megan Calloway, who still lived in Maplewood. And he had obtained her phone number. My hand trembled as I dialed. What would I say to this stranger who might be my aunt? How would I explain who I was and what I wanted? The phone rang 3 times before a woman's voice answered. Hello? Is this Megan Calloway? I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. Yes, it is. Who's calling? I took a deep breath. My name is Amanda Reynolds. I believe your brother Ryan may be my biological father. My mother was Elizabeth Reynolds. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, oh my God. Little Mandy? Is that really you? My heart skipped a beat. You know who I am? Of course I know who you are. Megan exclaimed. I used to babysit you when Lizzie needed to study. You were the cutest little thing. I can't believe you're calling after all these years. How did you find me? I was stunned. I hired a private investigator. I just found out about Elizabeth last week. My grandparents raised me as their daughter. They never told me Elizabeth was my mother. Those controlling, manipulative, Megan cut herself off. Sorry. I shouldn't speak ill of your grandparents. But that doesn't surprise me at all. They never thought anyone was good enough for their precious daughter, especially not my brother. So you knew my mother well? I asked eagerly. Lizzie was my best friend, Megan said, her voice softening. We were inseparable in high school. That's how she met Ryan, through me. And when her parents kicked her out, she lived with us until she passed. I have so many questions, I said, feeling overwhelmed. About her, about Ryan, about everything. Of course you do, honey. Listen, why don't we meet in person? I still have photos, letters, things that belong to your mom. Things that should be yours now. We arranged to meet that weekend. Megan still lived just outside Maplewood, a 3-hour drive from Boston. David offered to come with me, but this felt like a journey I needed to make alone. I'll be fine, I assured him. I'll call you after I meet with her. What about Ryan? He asked. Are you going to ask her about him too? I nodded. I want to know everything. Even the parts that might be painful to hear. The drive to New Jersey gave me plenty of time to think. I found myself wondering what my life might have been like if Elizabeth had lived, if I had been raised by my young, single mother instead of my strict grandparents. Would I have become an architect? Would I have met David? Would Lily exist? It was impossible to know, but the questions haunted me nonetheless. Megan's house was a modest ranch-style home with a well-tended garden. She was waiting for me on the porch when I arrived, a slender woman in her 50s with graying blonde hair and kind eyes. She stood as I approached, studying my face with wonder. It's incredible, she said, shaking her head. You look just like her. We embraced like old friends, though we were meeting for the first time in over 35 years. She led me inside to a cozy living room and disappeared briefly, returning with a large cardboard box. I kept everything, she explained, setting the box on the coffee table. After the accident, your grandparents wouldn't let us see you. They threatened legal action if we tried. Ryan was still in prison, and the rest of us, well, we had no legal rights. But I always hoped someday you might come looking for answers. I felt tears welling in my eyes. Thank you for not forgetting about me. How could I? Megan smiled, though her eyes were sad. You were Lizzie's whole world. We spent hours going through the contents of the box. There were more photographs, Elizabeth holding me as a newborn, Elizabeth and Ryan together at a park, Elizabeth laughing with Megan at what appeared to be a backyard barbecue. There were handwritten letters Elizabeth had sent to Ryan while he was in prison, full of updates about me and plans for our future as a family. And most precious of all, there was a journal Elizabeth had kept during her pregnancy and the first months of my life. I ran my fingers over her handwriting, marveling at this tangible connection to the mother I never knew. She really loved me, I whispered. More than anything, Megan confirmed. She was so excited to be your mom. She had all these plans for you both. And Ryan? I asked hesitantly. Did he love me too? Megan's expression grew complicated. Ryan loved Elizabeth. And he wanted to love you. But he was young and foolish and got caught up in things he shouldn't have. The drugs, the dealing, that wasn't who he really was. He was just trying to make fast money to support you both. My grandparents said he disappeared after he got out of prison. That he wanted nothing to do with me. Megan's eyes flashed with anger. That's not true. Not even close to true. Ryan tried to see you after he was released. He went to your grandparents' house, begging to be allowed to be part of your life. They threatened to call the police, to report him for violating parole. They told him the best thing he could do for you was to disappear. I felt sick. Another lie, another manipulation. And he believed them? He was in a vulnerable position. One call from them could have sent him back to prison. But he didn't give up right away. He consulted a lawyer about his parental rights, but without money for a legal battle and with his criminal record. She shrugged helplessly. The system wasn't on his side. So what happened to him? Where is he now? Megan took my hand. Ryan struggled after Elizabeth died and he lost you too. He fell back into old habits, spent time in and out of jail. But about 15 years ago, he got clean for good. He moved to Arizona, started a landscaping business. He's doing well now. My heart raced. Is he still alive? Very much so. Megan smiled. And he would be overjoyed to know you're looking for him. You're in touch with him? We talk every few weeks. He's my brother, after all. She hesitated. Would you like me to call him? Let him know you're here? I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Megan picked up her phone and dialed. After a brief conversation explaining the situation, she handed me the phone. Hello? I said, my voice barely audible. Amanda? A man's voice, deep and weathered by time. Is it really you? It's me, I confirmed, tears flowing freely now. I just found out about everything. I've been looking for you. I've been waiting for this call for 35 years, Ryan said, his voice breaking. Not a day has gone by that I haven't thought about you, wondered how you were doing, what kind of person you'd become. We talked for almost an hour. Ryan told me about his relationship with Elizabeth, how they had planned to marry once he was released from prison, how devastated he had been by her death. He explained his failed attempts to be part of my life and his subsequent spiral into addiction. I'm not proud of a lot of the choices I made, he admitted. But getting clean, building a life, I did that for you, even though I thought I'd never see you again. I wanted to become someone you wouldn't be ashamed to call your father, just in case this day ever came. By the time we ended the call, we had made plans for him to fly to Boston the following month. I would finally meet my biological father face to face. It felt surreal, like a dream I might wake from at any moment. As I prepared to leave Megan's house, laden with the box of Elizabeth's possessions, she handed me one final item, a sealed envelope with my name written on it in Elizabeth's handwriting. She wrote this for you about a week before the accident, Megan explained. She asked me to keep it safe, to give it to you when you were older. I think she sensed something might happen to her. She was always intuitive that way. I clutched the letter to my chest, this message from beyond time, from the mother who had loved me and lost the chance to raise me. Thank you, I told Megan, embracing her tightly. For keeping her memory alive. for keeping faith that someday I would find my way back to the truth. As I drove home to Boston, I felt a strange mixture of grief and hope. I had lost the parents I thought I had, but I had discovered a mother who had loved me deeply and a father who had never stopped hoping to reconnect with me. The lies that had shaped my life had been exposed, but in their place, a new truth was emerging. Complicated, painful, but ultimately more authentic than the sanitized version of reality my grandparents had constructed. The drive back to Boston seemed both eternal and too brief. The sealed letter from Elizabeth sat on the passenger seat beside me, simultaneously beckoning and intimidating. Part of me wanted to pull over immediately and tear it open, desperate to hear my mother's voice across the decades. Another part was terrified of what I might find inside, what final thoughts she had committed to paper, never knowing they would reach me 35 years later. When I finally arrived home, David and Lily were waiting anxiously. They helped me carry in the precious box of memories Megan had given me, exclaiming over photographs and mementos as we spread them across our dining room table. She was beautiful, Lily said, holding a photo of Elizabeth at what appeared to be a beach, her hair blowing in the wind, her smile radiant. I can't believe how much you both look like her. And I talked to Ryan, my father, I told them, still adjusting to the strange new reality of those words. He's coming to visit next month. David squeezed my shoulder. How do you feel about that? Nervous? Excited? Overwhelmed? I laughed shakily. All of the above. Lily noticed the sealed envelope I had placed carefully aside. What's that? I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. It's a letter from Elizabeth, from my mother. She wrote it to me about a week before she died. Are you going to read it? David asked softly. I nodded. I need some time alone first. Is that okay? They both understood. David took Lily out for dinner, giving me the space I needed for this intimate communion with a ghost. I took the letter to our bedroom, sitting cross-legged on the bed where I had slept peacefully for years, blissfully ignorant of the lies that had shaped my existence. With trembling fingers, I carefully opened the envelope, trying not to tear the delicate paper that my mother had touched all those years ago. Inside was a single sheet of pale blue stationery, covered front and back with flowing handwriting. I took a deep breath and began to read. My dearest Amanda. If you're reading this letter, something has happened to me, and I am no longer there to watch you grow up. I pray this letter never needs to reach you, that I'll be there for every milestone, your first day of school, your first heartbreak, your graduation, your wedding. But life has taught me that we can't count on tomorrow, so I'm writing this just in case. You're sleeping in your crib as I write this, not quite 3 months old, so perfect and innocent. I still can't believe I helped create someone so magnificent. You have your father's eyes and my dimples, and when you smile, it's like the sun breaking through clouds. I want you to know how deeply, completely, and utterly you are loved. From the moment I knew you existed, you became the center of my universe. Your father and I weren't ready for you, we were young and foolish and made many mistakes. But you, my sweet girl, were never a mistake. You were the most beautiful surprise, the greatest gift I've ever received. I don't know what your grandparents will tell you about me or about Ryan if I'm not there to speak for myself. They're good people who love you, but they see the world in black and white, while life is lived in infinite shades of gray. They never approved of Ryan or understood why I loved him. They may paint him as a villain in our story, but please know that's not the truth. Ryan made mistakes, we both did, but he loves you. He wants to be a good father to you. If circumstances have separated you from him, please don't judge him too harshly. Seek him out when you're older, if you can. Give him a chance to explain his side of the story. As for me, I hope they tell you that I was more than my mistakes too. That I was working hard to build a future for us. That I was studying psychology at night school, dreaming of becoming a therapist someday. That I sang off-key lullabies to you every night and read you stories even though you were too young to understand the words. That I promised you the moon and stars and meant to move heaven and earth to give them to you. I hope they show you pictures of me, tell you stories about my life, help you know who I was. But if they don't, if for some reason they choose to shield you from the complicated truth of your origins, know that I was here. I existed. I loved you with every fiber of my being. Wherever I am now, whatever comes after this life, my love for you continues. It transcends time and space and death itself. When you look at the stars, know that I'm looking at them too. When you feel a sudden breeze on a still day, that's me brushing your cheek. When joy overwhelms you for no reason at all, that's my love finding its way to you. Live boldly, my darling girl. Question everything. Find your own truth. Forgive those who hurt you, not for their sake, but for your own. Love deeply, even when it's risky. Make beautiful mistakes and learn from them. And know, always know, that you began your life surrounded by love so powerful it will echo through eternity. Forever and always yours. Mom, Elizabeth. By the time I finished reading, I was sobbing uncontrollably, clutching the letter to my chest as if I could somehow embrace the woman who had written it. The room felt charged with her presence, as if the act of reading her words had momentarily thinned the veil between us. Elizabeth, my mother, had loved me. Had wanted me. Had planned a future for us. And my grandparents had stolen that from me, erasing her from my life as if she had never existed. I read the letter again, and then a third time, drinking in every word, committing them to memory. She had known, somehow, that she might not be there to raise me. She had reached across time to send me this message of love. And in doing so, she had given me permission to forge my own path forward, to question, to seek truth, to forgive. Forgiveness. The word stuck in my throat. Could I forgive my grandparents for their monumental deception? For robbing me of my true identity, of my connection to Elizabeth and Ryan? For the years of therapy I would undoubtedly need to process this betrayal? I wasn't sure. But Elizabeth's words echoed in my mind, forgive those who hurt you, not for their sake, but for your own. Perhaps someday I would find that forgiveness. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday. For now, I had more immediate concerns, integrating this new knowledge into my sense of self, preparing to meet my biological father, and deciding how much, if any, contact I wanted with my grandparents moving forward. When David and Lily returned from dinner, they found me sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by Elizabeth's photographs and possessions. I had created a timeline of her short life, arranging the photos chronologically, filling in the gaps with information from her journal and Megan's stories. Look at what I found, I said, my voice still raw from crying. Her whole life, laid out in front of me. All these years I could have known her, at least through these memories. Lily knelt beside me, her eyes wide as she took in the collection. Can I read her letter? I hesitated for a moment, then handed it to her. This was her heritage too, Elizabeth was her grandmother. She deserved to know. As Lily read, tears welled in her eyes. David sat beside me on the floor, his arm around my shoulders. She knew, Lily whispered when she finished. She somehow knew she might not be there for you, and she made sure to leave this for you. I nodded, unable to speak. What happens now, Mom? Lily asked. With great-grandma and great-grandpa? With Ryan? It was the question I'd been asking myself all day. I don't know yet. I need time to process all of this. But I do know one thing, we're going to learn everything we can about Elizabeth. She deserves to be remembered. If you're still with me on this journey, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed everything? How did you handle it? Drop a comment below, and don't forget to like this video if you're finding this story of family secrets and betrayal as powerful as I did. Let's continue with what happened next in this incredible journey to discover my true identity. The month between my discovery of Elizabeth's letter and Ryan's scheduled visit passed in a blur of emotions. I took an extended leave from work, unable to focus on architectural designs when my own foundation had been so thoroughly shaken. Instead, I immersed myself in learning everything I could about Elizabeth, reading her journal cover to cover, studying her photographs, and having long conversations with Megan, who was happy to share memories of her best friend. She loved autumn, Megan told me during one of our frequent phone calls. She used to say the changing leaves reminded her that transformation could be beautiful. I looked out my kitchen window at the October trees, their leaves turning gold and crimson. I love autumn too, I said softly. I never knew why it felt so special to me. David was my anchor throughout this turbulent time, listening patiently as I processed my grief and rage, offering quiet support without trying to fix the unfixable. Lily, too, showed wisdom beyond her 16 years, asking thoughtful questions about Elizabeth and sharing my excitement about meeting Ryan. My grandparents called repeatedly in the weeks following our confrontation. I let their calls go to voicemail, not yet ready to hear their voices or their excuses. Their messages ranged from defensive, "We only did what we thought was best," to pleading, "Please don't shut us out of your life." I listened to each one, trying to find empathy for their perspective, but the wound was still too fresh. As Ryan's visit approached, my anxiety mounted. What if we had nothing in common? What if the biological connection wasn't enough to overcome 35 years of separation? What if he was disappointed in the person I'd become? The night before his arrival, I confessed these fears to David as we lay in bed. "It's natural to be nervous," he reassured me. "But from what you've told me about your conversation with him, he sounds genuinely excited to meet you. And remember, he's probably just as nervous as you are." "I keep thinking about what Elizabeth wrote in her letter," I said. "About giving him a chance to tell his side of the story. She wanted us to know each other." "Then honor her wish," David said simply. "Go into tomorrow with an open heart. That's all anyone can ask." Ryan's flight was scheduled to arrive at Logan Airport at 1:15 p.m. David offered to come with me, but this felt like a moment I needed to face alone. "I'll be fine," I assured him. "We're meeting in a public place, and I'll call you afterward." I arrived at the airport an hour early, too anxious to sit at home waiting. I paced the arrivals area, rehearsing what I would say when I finally came face to face with my biological father. Should I hug him? Shake his hand? What does one do when meeting a parent for the first time at age 37? The flight arrived on time. I stood near the exit from the secure area, scanning the faces of deplaning passengers. And then suddenly, there he was, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and familiar hazel eyes. My eyes. Elizabeth's eyes. He spotted me immediately, recognition flashing across his face. He stopped in his tracks, his carry-on bag slipping from his shoulder. "Amanda?" he asked, his voice catching. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. We stood frozen for a moment, separated by a few feet and 35 years. Then, as if pulled by an invisible force, we moved toward each other. When his arms wrapped around me, something clicked into place, a missing piece of my identity that I hadn't even realized was absent. "You look so much like her," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Like my Lizzie." We went to a quiet cafe in the airport, both of us too overwhelmed for the immediate drive back to my house. Over coffee, the initial awkwardness gradually gave way to genuine connection. Ryan was nothing like the irresponsible delinquent my grandparents had described. He was thoughtful, articulate, with a quiet dignity that spoke of hard-won wisdom. "I won't pretend I was a saint back then," he said, answering my unspoken questions about his past. "I made terrible choices that cost me everything I cared about. But losing Elizabeth, losing you, it eventually became the wake-up call I needed." "Megan said you tried to see me after you got out of prison." Ryan's eyes darkened with old pain. "Your grandparents made it very clear that I wasn't welcome in your life. They threatened legal action, threatened to report me to my parole officer. I was in no position to fight them then." "Why didn't you try again later? When you were more stable?" He looked down at his coffee cup. "I did, actually. When you were about 10. I'd been clean for a few years by then, had a steady job. I consulted a lawyer about my rights, then went to their house." He paused, the memory obviously painful. "They told me you were thriving, that you had no idea you were adopted, that disrupting your life would be selfish and cruel. They showed me pictures of you, playing piano, holding academic awards. You looked happy. So you gave up, I said, unable to keep the accusation from my voice. I made what I thought was the loving choice, he corrected gently. I had no legal standing. Fighting them would have meant dragging you through a court battle, forcing you to learn that your whole life was based on a lie. I couldn't do that to you. He met my eyes. Was I wrong? Would you have wanted to know the truth back then? The question caught me off guard. Would 10-year-old Amanda have been better off knowing? I wasn't sure. I don't know, I admitted. But I wish I'd had the chance to make that choice for myself. Me too, he said softly. Every day for the past 27 years, I've wondered if I made the right decision. If staying away was truly what was best for you. As we talked, I began to see the complex web of choices, mistakes, and circumstances that had shaped all our lives. My grandparents' rigidity and control had driven Elizabeth away in the first place. Ryan's poor decisions had left him vulnerable to their manipulations. Elizabeth's tragic death had left a vacuum that they had filled with deception, perhaps initially with good intentions that calcified into a lifestyle of lies. By the time we left the cafe, something had shifted between us. We weren't quite father and daughter yet, that relationship would take time to build, but we were no longer strangers. There was a foundation of understanding, a shared grief for what might have been, and perhaps most importantly, a genuine desire to know each other now. I drove Ryan to my home, where David and Lily were waiting to meet him. I watched with a surreal sense of wonder as my husband shook hands with my biological father, as my daughter hugged the grandfather she never knew she had. You have her smile, Ryan told Lily, his eyes crinkling with emotion. Elizabeth's smile. Over dinner, the conversation flowed more easily than I could have imagined. Ryan shared stories about Elizabeth that neither Megan nor my grandparents had told me, how she loved spicy food, how she could name every constellation in the night sky, how she used to sing me to sleep with Beatles songs because she believed I would grow up with sophisticated musical taste. She had such plans for you, Ryan said, his eyes distant with memory. She was going to take you camping in every national park, teach you to play guitar, make sure you knew how to change a tire and cook a perfect omelette. Each detail was a precious gift, another thread connecting me to the mother I had lost. But they also brought fresh waves of grief for all that might have been. Later that evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Ryan, David, and I sat in the living room with cups of tea. The conversation turned to my grandparents and the impossible question of forgiveness. I'm not sure I can ever forgive them, I confessed. Not just for lying to me all these years, but for keeping you and Megan away, for erasing Elizabeth from my life. Ryan was quiet for a moment. Forgiveness is tricky, he finally said. I spent years being angry at your grandparents. But eventually, I had to acknowledge that my own actions had given them the ammunition they needed. And holding on to that anger was poisoning me, not them. That's different, I argued. You made mistakes, but you tried to make amends. They maintained this elaborate lie for 37 years. And they only revealed the truth because they were afraid of dying with it on their conscience. It wasn't about me, it was about easing their guilt. Probably, Ryan agreed. But here's the thing about forgiveness that took me a long time to learn. It's not about absolving the other person of responsibility or pretending what they did wasn't wrong. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of resentment. His words echoed Elizabeth's letter so closely that I shivered. Forgive those who hurt you, not for their sake, but for your own. I'm not saying you need to let them back into your life, Ryan continued. That's a separate decision. But carrying this anger will hurt you more than it hurts them. I wasn't ready to hear this, wasn't ready to consider forgiveness when the betrayal still felt so raw. But I tucked his words away, alongside Elizabeth's, seeds that might someday take root. Ryan stayed with us for a week. We spent the days getting to know each other, looking through photographs, and visiting places in Boston that held significance for me. I showed him the architecture firm where I worked, the park where David had proposed, the elementary school Lily had attended. Each shared experience built another bridge between us, spanning the decades of separation. On his last night with us, Ryan presented me with a small wooden box, similar to the one my grandparents had sent to Lily. "I've been adding to this since you were born," he explained as I opened it. "Things I wanted to share with you someday, if I ever got the chance." Inside were treasures that brought fresh tears to my eyes: a pressed flower from Elizabeth's funeral, a small stuffed rabbit that had been mine as an infant, a collection of birthday cards he had written to me each year but never sent, and photographs I had never seen before: Elizabeth pregnant with me, Ryan holding me as a newborn, the three of us together as a family for the brief time we had been one. "Thank you," I whispered, clutching the box to my chest. "For not forgetting me. For keeping these connections alive. You've always been in my heart," he said simply. "Not a day has gone by that I haven't thought of you, haven't wondered who you were becoming. I'm so proud of the woman you are, Amanda. And Elizabeth would be too." As we said goodbye at the airport the next day, Ryan held me tightly. "This isn't an ending," he promised. "It's a beginning. We have time now to build something new." I nodded against his shoulder, believing him. We had lost 35 years, but if Elizabeth's death had taught me anything, it was that life was precious and unpredictable. There was no time to waste on regret for what couldn't be changed. There was only moving forward, creating something meaningful from the broken pieces of the past. Ryan's visit left me with a profound sense of connection to my biological parents, but also with lingering questions about my grandparents' deception. 2 weeks after Ryan returned to Arizona, I finally decided I was ready to face them again, not for reconciliation, necessarily, but for answers I still needed. I called my grandmother on a Tuesday morning, catching her off guard. "Amanda," she exclaimed, her voice a mixture of surprise and hope. "I'm so glad you called. We've been so worried." "I need to talk to you and Grandpa," I interrupted, the terms Mom and Dad no longer feeling right on my tongue. "In person. I have questions that need answers." She hesitated only briefly. "Of course, sweetheart. When?" "This weekend. I'll drive down on Saturday." I paused. "I'll be coming alone." I wasn't ready to expose Lily to the difficult conversation I anticipated, and David had agreed that this was a journey I needed to make by myself. "We'll be here," she promised. "We love you, Amanda. Please remember that." I didn't respond to her declaration of love. The words felt hollow after decades of deception. The 3-hour drive to their home in Connecticut gave me plenty of time to organize my thoughts and questions. I had spent hours in therapy that week, working through my anger and grief, trying to reach a place where I could speak to them without being consumed by rage. I wasn't there yet, but I was closer. Their house looked smaller than I remembered, the colonial facade less imposing. Or perhaps it was that I saw it differently now, not as the home where I'd grown up, but as the place where a massive deception had been carefully maintained for nearly 4 decades. They were waiting for me in the living room, perched anxiously on the edge of the sofa. They had aged visibly in the months since I'd last seen them, my grandfather's shoulders more stooped, my grandmother's face more deeply lined. Part of me felt a pang of guilt for the stress I had caused them. The larger part reminded me that they had brought this on themselves. "Amanda," my grandfather said, starting to rise. I held up a hand, stopping him. "I'm not here for a reconciliation. I'm here because I still have questions, and I believe I deserve honest answers." They exchanged a glance, then nodded in unison. "Of course," my grandmother said. "Ask us anything." I took a seat in the armchair across from them, maintaining physical and emotional distance. "I've met with Ryan," I began, watching their expressions closely. "And with Megan Calloway. I've read Elizabeth's journal and her letter to me." My grandmother's hand flew to her mouth. "Megan kept that letter? After all these years?" "She kept everything," I said coldly. "Unlike you." My grandfather flinched but said nothing. "I want to know why," I continued. "Not why you decided to raise me as your daughter initially. I can almost understand that decision, made in grief and shock. But why maintain the lie for 37 years? Why not tell me when I was old enough to understand?" My grandfather cleared his throat. We convinced ourselves it was better for you not to know. That it would only cause you pain and confusion. That's not good enough, I said firmly. The truth always comes out eventually. You must have known that. My grandmother twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit I suddenly realized I had inherited. At first, it was about protecting you. You were so small when Elizabeth died, barely 2 months old. Taking you in, raising you as our own, it seemed the most natural thing in the world. But as the years passed, my grandfather continued, the lie became comfortable. The longer we maintained it, the harder it became to imagine telling you the truth. How do you tell a child that her entire life is based on a falsehood? How do you explain that the people she calls mom and dad are actually her grandparents? That her mother is dead and her father was deemed unfit? You could have found a way, I said. There are books about this, professionals who could have helped. You chose the easy path, for yourselves, not for me. Yes, my grandmother admitted, surprising me with her candor. Eventually, it was about us too. About our fear of losing you, of being judged for the decisions we'd made. We told ourselves we were protecting you, but we were protecting ourselves too. The admission, while infuriating, was also oddly liberating. At least she was finally being honest. Did you ever consider that I had a right to know Elizabeth? To know Ryan? To know my own history? My grandfather looked genuinely puzzled. Elizabeth was gone. And Ryan? Ryan was not a positive influence. We truly believed we were giving you a better life than either of them could have. That wasn't your decision to make, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. You stole my chance to know my biological father. You kept me from Megan and the rest of the Calloway family, who loved me too. You erased Elizabeth from my life as if she never existed. We didn't erase her, my grandmother protested. We have photographs, videos. That you never showed me. I cut her off. You kept them hidden away, let me believe a lie my entire life. Do you have any idea what that's done to me? Finding out at 37 that my entire identity is based on a fabrication? Tears were streaming down my grandmother's face now. My grandfather looked stricken, his usual composure crumbling. We made a terrible mistake, he admitted, his voice barely audible. We can see that now. Why tell me now? I demanded. Why send that box to Lily instead of coming to me directly? They exchanged another glance, some unspoken communication passing between them. My grandmother nodded slightly, giving him permission to speak. I've been diagnosed with congestive heart failure, my grandfather said quietly. The prognosis isn't good. 6 months, maybe a year. He held up a hand as I started to respond. I'm not telling you this to gain your sympathy. I'm answering your question. We realized that if we didn't tell you the truth now, while I'm still here to face the consequences, your mother would be left to bear the burden alone after I'm gone. The news of his illness hit me harder than I had expected. Despite everything, these were the people who had raised me, who had been present for every milestone of my life. The thought of losing my grandfather, even now, when our relationship was fractured beyond repair, was painful. And sending the box to Lily? I pressed, pushing past the emotion. Why involve her in this at all? My grandmother looked down at her hands. We were afraid you wouldn't listen to us. That you would shut us out completely if we tried to tell you directly. We thought Lily might help you see our side, help you understand why we did what we did. You used my 16-year-old daughter as a buffer, I said, the anger returning. You put her in an impossible position because you were too cowardly to face me yourselves. Yes, my grandfather admitted. It was wrong. We see that now. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of 37 years of deception hanging between us. I had come seeking answers, and I had received them, though they were not particularly satisfying or exculpatory. What I hadn't expected was to feel a strange sense of closure beginning to form, a knot of tension slowly unraveling in my chest. I've been seeing a therapist, I finally said. She says that what you did, raising me under a false identity, is a form of emotional abuse. They winced in unison but didn't deny it. She also says that forgiveness is a process, not an event. That it's something I might achieve eventually, for my own healing, not for yours. I took a deep breath. I'm not there yet. I don't know if I'll ever be there. But I am trying to understand why you made the choices you did. That's more than we deserve, my grandfather said softly. Yes, it is, I agreed. But I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me. For Lily. For the family I'm trying to protect from the kind of secrets and lies that have defined mine. What happens now? My grandmother asked tentatively. Will we still be part of your life? Part of Lily's life? It was the question I had been dreading, the one I still didn't have a clear answer to. I don't know, I said honestly. I need more time. And if there is to be any relationship moving forward, it will have to be built on complete honesty. No more secrets, no more lies. They nodded solemnly, understanding the gravity of what I was saying. There's one more thing, I said, reaching into my bag. I want everything you have of Elizabeth's. Photographs, videos, journals, belongings, everything. They should have been mine all along. Of course, my grandmother said quickly. I've already gathered everything together. It's in boxes in the guest room. I'll help you load them into your car. As we carried box after box down to my car, I was struck by the sheer volume of materials they had kept hidden from me. Dozens of photo albums, home videos, Elizabeth's high school yearbooks, her favorite books with notes in the margins, even her childhood teddy bear. A treasure trove of connections to the mother I had never known, all kept carefully preserved but deliberately concealed. When the car was loaded, we stood awkwardly in the driveway, the gulf between us simultaneously vast and microscopic. Thank you for coming, my grandfather said formally. For giving us a chance to explain, even if our explanations are inadequate. I nodded, unable to offer forgiveness but unwilling to deepen the hurt with more accusations. I'll be in touch about your health, I told him. Let me know if things change. We love you, Amanda, my grandmother said, tears welling again. We always have, even if we showed it in terribly misguided ways. I know, I said, because despite everything, I did know that. Their love had been real, even if it had been wrapped in deception. Goodbye for now. As I drove away, glancing at them in my rearview mirror, two diminished figures standing in the driveway of the house where I'd grown up, I felt an unexpected lightness. Not forgiveness, not yet. But perhaps the beginning of acceptance. The start of a new chapter that acknowledged the complex, painful past without being controlled by it. I had survived the confrontation. I had asked my questions and received the closest thing to honest answers they were capable of giving. Now I could move forward, with therapy, with building a relationship with Ryan, with integrating Elizabeth's memory into my life, and with creating a family culture of truth and openness with David and Lily. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be more difficult conversations, more tears, more processing of the complicated emotions this revelation had unleashed. But for the first time since discovering the truth, I felt capable of navigating that road. Of finding my way to a new understanding of who I was, not just Richard and Eleanor's daughter, not just Elizabeth and Ryan's daughter, but Amanda Reynolds, a woman defined by more than the circumstances of her birth or the lies that had surrounded it. As I crossed the state line back into Massachusetts, I called David. I'm coming home, I said, a world of meaning in those simple words. Home to the family I had chosen, to the truth I was still discovering, to the future I was determined to build from the scattered pieces of my past. 6 months after the day Lily opened that fateful package, our family gathered in my backyard for a special occasion. The spring air was fragrant with lilacs, Elizabeth's favorite flower, I had learned from her journal, and the table was set for an intimate celebration. Ryan had flown in from Arizona, now a regular visitor in our lives. Megan was there too, having become something of an honorary aunt to Lily. David moved around the grill with easy confidence, cooking steaks and vegetable skewers. Lily, who had recently turned 17, was showing Ryan photographs from her school's drama production. My grandfather had passed away 2 months earlier. Despite our complicated relationship, I had attended his funeral, standing beside my grandmother as we laid to rest a man who had been both my father and my deceiver. In his final weeks, we had reached a fragile peace, not forgiveness exactly, but a mutual acknowledgement of hurt and a shared desire to move forward with honesty. My grandmother sat in a garden chair, looking smaller and more frail than ever. Our relationship remained tentative, built on careful conversations and explicit boundaries. She was trying, in her way, to make amends, respecting my newfound relationship with Ryan, sharing stories about Elizabeth that she had kept hidden for decades, acknowledging the damage her deception had caused. I watched this makeshift family, bound by blood and choice, by shared history and newfound connections, and felt a profound sense of gratitude despite the painful journey that had brought us here. In some ways, the truth had indeed set me free, though the liberation had come with its own kind of agony. "Mom?" Lily appeared at my side, holding a small gift-wrapped package. "We have something for you." "We?" I asked, surprised. She nodded toward Ryan, who approached with a nervous smile. It was his idea, but I helped. I unwrapped the package to find a delicate silver locket. Opening it, I gasped at the tiny photographs inside, Elizabeth on one side, me on the other, our identical smiles frozen in time. "So you can always keep her close," Ryan explained. "And remember that her story lives on in you." Tears pricked my eyes as I fastened the locket around my neck. "It's perfect. Thank you both." David called us to the table then, and we gathered around the feast he had prepared. Before we began eating, Ryan raised his glass in a toast. "To family," he said simply. "In all its complicated, messy, beautiful forms." "To family," we echoed, glasses clinking in the golden evening light. Later, as the sun began to set and Megan helped Lily clear the dessert plates, I found myself sitting beside my grandmother on the porch swing. "You've built something beautiful here," she said, gesturing to the yard where Ryan and David were deep in conversation. "Something true." "I'm trying," I acknowledged. "It's not always easy." "No," she agreed. "Truth rarely is." She hesitated, then added, "I've been seeing a therapist too. She's helping me understand why Richard and I made the choices we did. Not to excuse them, but to make sure I don't repeat those patterns." I nodded, appreciating her effort even as I maintained my emotional distance. "That's good. Elizabeth would be proud of you," she said unexpectedly. "Of how you've handled all of this. She was always braver than I was, more willing to face difficult truths." "You're like her that way." The comparison to the mother I'd never known was a gift I hadn't expected from her. "Thank you for saying that." As the evening wound down and our guests prepared to leave, I found myself standing in my kitchen, watching through the window as Lily hugged Ryan goodbye. Their bond had developed quickly, the biological connection between grandfather and granddaughter translating into a genuine affection that warmed my heart. David slipped his arm around my waist. "Penny, for your thoughts?" "I was just thinking about how much has changed in 6 months," I said. "How much I've changed?" "For the better," he observed. "I think so." I leaned against him, drawing strength from his steady presence. "I'm not who I thought I was a year ago. But maybe I'm closer to who I was always meant to be." The journey wasn't over, of course. I still had moments of anger, days when the betrayal felt fresh and raw. The weekly therapy sessions continued, helping me process the complex emotions that surfaced unpredictably. But increasingly, there were also moments of peace, of acceptance, even of a strange gratitude for the truth that had finally come to light. I had learned that identity is not fixed but fluid, constantly evolving as we integrate new information and experiences. I was still Amanda Reynolds, still an architect, still David's wife and Lily's mother. But I was also Elizabeth's daughter, Ryan's daughter, a woman with a history more complex and nuanced than I had ever imagined. In Elizabeth's journal, I had found a quote she had copied from somewhere, underlined for emphasis: "The truth will set you free, but first it will make you miserable." How right she had been. The revelation of my true origins had initially shattered my sense of self, leaving me adrift in a sea of doubt and anger. But from those broken pieces, I was building something new, something more authentic, more resilient, more deeply rooted in reality. As our guests drove away and Lily headed upstairs to call her friends, David and I stood on the front porch, his arm still around my waist, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. "Do you ever wonder," I asked softly, "what would have happened if my parents had just told me the truth from the beginning? If I had grown up knowing Elizabeth was my mother?" David considered the question thoughtfully. "I think you would still be you," he said finally. "Different in some ways, perhaps, but your essential nature. Your kindness, your creativity, your strength, those things come from within you, not from the story you were told about yourself." His words settled over me like a blessing, an affirmation of something I had been struggling to believe, that beneath the layers of deception and revelation, there was a core self that remained true and unchanged. We stood there in comfortable silence for a while longer, watching the night deepen around us. The path that had led me here had been unimaginably painful, filled with betrayal and loss. But it had also brought unexpected gifts, connection with my biological father, knowledge of the mother who had loved me so deeply in the brief time she had with me, and a newfound authenticity in all my relationships. "I'm ready to go in," I said finally, turning toward the warm light of our home. Toward the future we would continue to build together, one honest moment at a time. If this family revenge drama resonated with you, I'd love to know your thoughts. Have you ever experienced a moment when family secrets came to light and changed everything? How did you handle it? The journey to forgiveness isn't easy, but it's often necessary for our own healing. Please drop a comment below sharing your experiences or reactions to this story. Don't forget to like this video if you found value in it, subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories with unexpected twists, and share with someone who might need to hear that even after betrayal, healing is possible. Thank you for accompanying me on this journey of discovery, heartbreak, and ultimately, renewal. Remember, sometimes the most painful truths lead to the most beautiful transformations. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.